Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, November the 5th, 2024. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. Got a great show planned for you today. Of course, we will have the Dean, Bill Kurelic, and the Grand Poobah, Mark Porter, here to talk about all the positive vibes coming out of the winning trip to Happy Valley. We'll discuss that, recruiting, get into the college football playoff rankings being released later this evening, possibly. But really, we'll get to that mostly with Sam on football. It's going to join us today after the guys. We don't usually have guests on the show, but I'm a fan of Sam's, and it will be kind of just an interesting little bit of an outside view on the Buckeyes as tonight's rankings are revealed. And I think Sam will do a good job of putting everything in context that we've seen to this point. And got to pay for the show too. You ever notice how the days are shorter, but your to-do lists aren't? Power through your busy days with Factor. No prep, no mess meals. These are not the TV dinners you saw in the beginning of Risky Business where Tom Cruise bites on a frozen Salisbury steak. These are legit. From breakfast to dinner and anything in between, Factor has easy, nutritious options to keep you fueled, and feeling your best. Whether you like routine or you like mixing it up, Factor has you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week, 60 additional convenience options you can add to your box. Don't let the shorter days slow you down. Stay energized with America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. Head to factormeals.com/bucknuts50 and use code Bucknuts50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code Bucknuts50 at factormeals.com/Bucknuts50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. I promise you, these are legit. I have raised food snobs, and they love it. The Dean, the Grand Poobah are here. Lots of football to talk about. There was a time on Saturday, I don't know if you guys know this, that I contacted the FBI and applied for the Witness Protection Program. But then Ohio State came back, and everything was fine. Let's take this from our perspective, William. Maybe your thoughts on the game, and then you've contacted recruits after games low about 1 trillion times. Can you put in context the overall vibe you got from the guys and kind of what this means from Ohio State on the recruiting trail?
Well, to begin with, I contacted an Ohio State source, a good source, and congratulated them. And they were ecstatic. Big win, huge win, they felt like. And who would not agree with that? Going into Happy Valley, and you really couldn't afford 2 losses at this point in the season. And you could maybe make it work, but it would be a whole lot more difficult. So it was huge. And then after that, I started contacting recruits. And as I put in my What I Am Hearing column, good morning, Deetra. As I put in my What I Am Hearing column on Sunday, I do this a lot, not a lot, but at least 2 or 3 games a year, big games, contact recruits and just get their reactions. And I would say that the overall vibe I got was that the reactions were as good, happy, positive. It's just about any game I can remember doing for quite some time. So it resonated very, very well with recruits, no doubt. And as we talk about, it just makes it easier to go out and sell the program, so to speak, when you're coming off a huge win.
There's no question. Like I said, it wasn't necessarily easy. I thought Ohio State generally controlled the game. Mark, the first part, put it this way, it was a big enough game that we had to break up Buckeye in the Sky into 2 parts because I sent Mark more plays than I usually do, but I had to. The first part went up. I hope everyone has checked that out. You will not get a better X and O's breakdown than that. And boy, what an interesting game to break down. There's lots of huge plays and dramatic mood swings. Mark, after watching the game and then breaking down the film, what are you thinking right now?
First of all, I had an emotionless experience with the game, and I'm very pragmatic as it is, but I was coaching a game while the game was being played. So to watch the game live, I was getting someone's cell phone shoved in my face every 10 minutes. Here's what's going on. And when they went down 10-0, the mood of all the Buckeye fans where I was at was in the gutter, and it was like a real live message board. All the fans at the game were boo, it's death. And everyone just kind of concentrated on our game, and we went about our day. And then I got to watch the game back in an emotionless state. That's why I said that, because I already knew what happened. So I didn't have to ride the wave. So it didn't drive me nuts on the pick six. I didn't, want to pull the quarterback from the game and replace him and throw the season out. It was so, yeah, like watching it that way was just a different experience for me, where I think it's a lesson us as fans not to ride these waves, that it will be okay in the end, that 10-0 start was evaporated by great football. And I liked it because it put pressure on that team, and they delivered underneath that pressure where you were down 2 possessions, you were going to have to grind it and play perfect, and they pulled it off. Breaking down it, for the first thing I noticed when I broke it down is Chip Kelly is making a difference. It's a normal offense 75% of the time, and then 25% of the time it's Chip Kelly genius or something different, or formations or motions or schemes or something you haven't seen and you're not going to see again. He does have a bag of tricks. I mean, the quads, the unbalanced, the motions. I mean, it's really fun to break down, and for me to have to sit there for 3 or 4 minutes with the play and just rewind, play, and really try to get it in the layman's terms for everybody else. It's kind of fun and it's kind of cool, and I hope everybody's enjoying the Buckeyes in the sky. But that was a big win. That was a very quality win for the Big Ten, So I'm up. And if you remember on Friday or Thursday, I said we would be okay, but that 10-0 spot that Vegas gave them made it a little more fun.
Yeah, I still believe this. If you watch the game, if Will Howard crosses the end zone with that ball, I do think I'm not saying it will be a blowout, but if you put Penn State against Ohio State's defense and they have to pass, they're in trouble. That game would have gotten out of control. I think it would have been a 20-point W. However, it wasn't. And Bill, the recruits that were there who were torn, do we know anything about them? Do you feel strongly about this effort affecting that, or is it now just kind of get the ball rolling again?
Well, I think, I talked to not a number, but multiple recruits that were actually at the game. Of course, they were visitors of Penn State. And, the vibe was they came away impressed with Ohio State. It's not easy. You're playing a team that was number 3 in the country going into their stadium and all that. That's not an easy place to win. They've had to go to Oregon and Penn State and win at 2 places very difficult. They came up just short, and I mean just short at Oregon, but this time they didn't. So I think the biggest vibe I got was that the recruits were impressed with Ohio State being able to go in there and play as well as they did. And a number of them recruited on how Ohio State played up front, and in particular, the offensive line. They were impressed with the offensive line play, and so was I, for that matter.
I'm writing this down really quick so I make sure I don't forget it. I want to give credit to Eric Turnbull because he noticed something that I noticed. On the Brandon Ennis touchdown, when he's celebrating in the end zone, do you know who he celebrated with? Bryson Rogers and Jaden Ballard. Who thought they were going to throw a touchdown pass when they had all the reserves in there? And that gets me to this. So during the games, I text with a couple people. One is an Ohio State source and one is an NFL guy. This is not a lie. Within 30 seconds of that play, both sent me a text that said essentially, Chip is in his bag. Both use the word bag, meaning he gets it. He understands what they're doing to him, and they're in trouble. So that was very cool. I think you guys hit on it. Universally, if you watch any coverage of this game, they all talk about how Chip got into his bag and that Chip was worth it. I saw David Pollock say out loud, "What a money well spent." That's not going back in the bag, people. That's good to know that we have Chip calling plays for the rest of the year. He's getting his groove. I thought that was Chip's best game. And if you take out the errors, and I've said this in every roundtable, and I've said this on the show, and I've been attacked for it mercilessly. Just kidding. If Ohio State does not turn it over, they will win. I know that sounds like a statement of the obvious. I don't believe that for every team. But if you look, if Ohio State does not turn the ball over, I don't care who they play, I'm going to predict that they win the game going forward. All right, William, you mentioned that recruiting does not stop now. I didn't circle Purdue, Bill, as a major game for recruits. However, as I follow your tremendous coverage, I've been impressed that the guys coming this weekend are actually really, really good. My only guess is that I think a lot of high school football seasons have completed, so maybe guys have a little bit better chance to travel. I don't know, but I was actually really impressed with some of the names you've got on the docket for this weekend for Purdue, given, you would think there might be a letdown for a game against a team rated 16 out of 16 in the Big Ten. Can you let us know maybe what we are looking for guest list-wise this weekend?
Well, volume-wise, in terms of top talent, or at least reasonably high-level talent, volume-wise, it's not going to be as good. Definitely not as good as the Michigan game will be. And it may not be quite as good as Nebraska or Iowa. But at the top, it is really good. And I had the story yesterday. I was sitting at my desk, my office, working, and all of a sudden I get told that Turbo Rogers making an official visit to Ohio State. And I got it on our site right away. That's huge. I've talked a lot about Turbo Rogers. He is an Alabama commitment right now, but Ohio State is really trying to flip. We talked about Chip Kelly. If Turbo Rogers flips to Ohio State, Chip Kelly will be a huge part of that. He and Carlos Lachlan. Lachlan has done a great job of recruiting Turbo Rogers. He started recruiting him when Turbo was in 8th grade. Turbo is from Montgomery Carver High School, and where is Carlos Lachlan from? Montgomery, Alabama. Turbo really likes the possibility of how he could be used in Chip Kelly's offense. It just so happens that Turbo this year is playing quite a bit, maybe more so than ever, at the slot position. So he's playing in the backfield. He played way more as a running back as a junior. Now he's playing a lot in the slot. How has Chip Kelly told him he would use him at Ohio State? As a guy that can play a lot in the slot and be in the backfield. And Chip Kelly's shown him there are a lot of ways I can get you the ball. So that's a huge official visit this coming weekend. As I put on our message board yesterday, one of the things that worries me a little bit is he hasn't used up his Alabama official visit yet. So that most likely is still to come. But getting him on campus for that visit this weekend, huge. Speaking of running backs, Derek Cooper from Hollywood, Chaminade, Madonna. And who else is from there, Dan? I know you know.
He's a big freshman that's good as a youngster and likes to score touchdowns in every game except this past weekend, J.J. Smith.
Yep. So Derek Cooper is coming up for the game. Of course, he'll be an unofficial visit because he's a 2026 guy, but he is one of the country's top running backs. Deron Parks, also from Florida, offensive lineman. But Savion Hyder from Virginia, country's #1 2026 running back. He is looking forward to making his visit to Ohio State this weekend. And Caden Henderson, moving to the class of 2027, is a linebacker from Tampa Jesuit High School, #1 linebacker in the country, making his visit to Ohio State this weekend. So you can see right there at the top, this is a really good weekend at the top. And there'll be some more names, absolutely, between now and Saturday.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We have so many questions here and so much I want to get to. And then we'll hit the national stuff with Ohio State with Mr. Sam on football. So let's do this, Bill. Let's talk about where you guys were this past weekend, especially yourself. And then we will rapid fire these questions before we get out of here. So anybody who's asked a question, we will get to it. Keep them coming. But this weekend marked the end of Tavian St. Clair's high school football career. If you remember when we talked about this last week, I expressed some reticence about the matchup with Chaminade Julienne, CJ, as they call it here in Dayton, just because, excuse me, Bellefontaine had lost to Bellbrook. I'd seen Bellbrook play. CJ is a private school, and when you have a private school, you don't have as many holes. Bellefontaine, not your traditional power. I kind of felt they'd go down, and I got a text Friday night as I was hanging out with my kids at college that the era was almost over, Bill. Take us down the end of an era for Tavian St. Clair. What kind of game was it? And then you want to kind of put in perspective the end of Tavian St. Clair as a high school player and his next step coming to Ohio State. Feel free.
Yeah, I was actually going, as soon as you mentioned where were you at and talking about that, I was going to mention you hit that on the nose, Dan, when you talked about in our last podcast. Don't sleep on Chaminade, Julian Chaminade.
TJ.
Don't sleep on them. And I will say that when they came out for pregame warmups, I thought, I don't know. In fact, I thought this, of all the high school games I've been to this season, that may be the smallest in terms of volume of players that I've seen this year. I don't know, because I didn't count the number of players they had, but it wasn't a lot. I said, there's going to be some guys going both ways here for CJ. So I kind of wondered about that a little bit. The game starts off, and it's a shootout. I think this team is just as Dan said, they're pretty – they may not have a lot of guys, but the guys they got are playing well. They dominated the game in the trenches on both sides of the ball, CJ. And when Tavian St. Clair dropped into the pocket, on most drops, he would drop 3 steps, and his 4th step would have to be sideways because he's trying to get away from the rush. It was hard on him. You know, most of his throws were from on the run, and they weren't necessarily by design. It was because he had to get out of the pocket. CJ was just a lot better up front on both sides of the ball. They ran the ball tremendously against Bellefontaine. The team that Bellefontaine had last year was stronger at wide receiver. It was stronger on the line, and that caught up with him on Friday night against CJ. Tavian had a great career, but as I was told, it tells you something when your quarterback is your strongest guy on the team.
You mean like in the weight room?
In the weight room by a considerable amount. So he just didn't have the help, and his top wide receiver did not play in that game. That didn't help either. So we put all those things together. It was just they couldn't keep up. They couldn't stop CJ on offense from scoring, and they just could not keep up with him. And a close game, 24-21 at halftime. CJ led, but they were not able to keep up with him scoring-wise in the second half.
We turn the page now, and the question for Tavian is just going to be the uptick in competition level. Obviously, if that was a concern for Ohio State, you would have known by now. And also, keep in mind, Tavian has performed very well at the national events. I don't really have any concern about that. Can't get Braylon Newcomb hurt though for your big games, Bill. The transfer from Centerville. If he didn't play, that would be a loss. Mark, where were you? And what's your vibe on what you saw this past weekend?
I got to see Menor versus St. Ignatius.
Mm-hmm.
I could say it was bad luck because Will Conroy did not play. He had a high ankle sprain. I think if they would have made it another week or two, he would have been back.
Mark, is it possible these guys are just nervous that you're coming and back out? You do not have the Midas touch this year, my friend.
Early on in my career, I didn't like to tell kids I was coming because it would make them nervous, or they would fear that, oh, I didn't play my best game when someone was watching. And I'm not here to give 16-year-olds anxiety. I'm never really judging anyone that harshly on a half. I'm there more to bear witness, so to speak. Safety, Haddad, big cast on his hand, playing with one arm, but he played. Makes it a little hard to wrap people up and grab hold of them like playing like that. But I think that's been the story of what Bill and I have seen with St. Ignatius. When we go, sometimes they're playing, sometimes they're not. On the other side, who I was really there to see, because we know how good the Ohio State caliber kids are. I don't mean that like in any disrespect to them, but we needed to check out Landry Breed, the offensive tackle for Mentor. Put his name in with those other four that are elite that we've been talking about. He belongs in that bunch. He's going to be someone that we're going to talk about a lot this summer. Big kid, strong kid, powerful. Probably 6'4", 6'5", close to 300. Probably maybe 290 if I was being generous. Just moves real well. They use him to trap and pull a lot. Has great pass protection. Mentor right now has the record of the best team in the state. So, big time props to them. And then, of course, let me see the receiver's name there. Why am I drawing a blank? Justin Hodge. He put on a show. He was the story of the night. One of the first plays there, he takes one of the house. A little bit later, he takes another one of the house. So that's going to be another name that we need to watch at receiver for in-state. I think he's already maybe the top receiver listed on the 24/7 list. He's probably my top receiver. And we watched him at Raw Talent all winter, so he's no stranger to this podcast. We've definitely done our homework there. So Landry was more the interesting guy. I went over at halftime to see Strongsville so I could see Storm Miller. I like the way they use him. They're playing Cleveland Heights. Marquise Davis goes out in the first quarter, and Cleveland Heights did everything.
He was out?
Yeah, he was out. He played last week when I saw him against Shake. Yeah, he got injured in the first half. May have been a pull or something. I wasn't there to see it, but when I got there, I was expecting to see him help mount a comeback, and instead Cleveland Heights was relying on a true freshman tailback to try to mount their comeback. So they were playing uphill. They had a couple other players that were coming back for injury. I know I'm singing a sad song for Cleveland Heights, but let's talk about Storm Miller. Inside linebacker, outside linebacker, defensive end pass rush skills, very athletic. I liked his emotion during the game. He's a leader. He's a talker. He's a guy that, you get a little personality of on the field, and you can kind of feel his emotion. So in a half, sometimes you do pick up a little bit. But, yeah, the Strongsville looks pretty good. I think they and Mentor are going to be the matchup next week. Mentor looks like they have everything firing on all cylinders. Not as big as I thought on defense, so they are beatable, Mentor, but they may have the edge next week if somebody cares.
Yeah, we are now into the second round, I believe, of the playoffs. The first round, I will say, is, to me, the playoffs really start this week. If you look at the first round, you can kind of sneak into the playoffs the way the system is set up. If you look at it this week, punches will be traded. It's going to get really good and interesting. The Dayton area has gone differently this year. Fairmont's been better than I expected. Springfield's already gone, so going to have some different names on the trophies this year, but that will be very cool. All right, Mark, we're going to do Buckeye in the Sky on Thursday when parts 1 and 2 come out, because we got so many questions here. We're going to go rapid fire here, Bill and Mark and myself. Rapid fire, not our strengths. I am the master of the digression, so I'm not going to answer here. So, William, get your have a sip of your caffeine there, and let's go. Mika, do you think Eli Lee, Jake Cook, and Isaiah West, all committed to your Buckeyes, get a rankings boost? Bill?
I don't expect any big boost from any of them, and that's not to say that I don't think they've had good seasons. I've seen 2 of those guys in person. I've seen Eli Lee in person this season. I've seen Jake Cook in person. I was impressed with both of them, but I already had them as players I've been impressed with. I've seen them before. I've seen them in camps. I've seen them many times. So I don't expect them to get big boosts, to be honest, but I don't think that matters. I think they're good players. And, I was talking with somebody pretty knowledgeable, very knowledgeable, actually, on offensive line play on Sunday. And we were talking about how in this day and age, coming in and playing on a offensive line at a school like Ohio State or Georgia or a program like that is almost impossible as a freshman. It just, even for David, I brought up David Sanders' name, and they said, well, yeah, he's an outlier maybe, but even for him, it's not an automatic to come in and play. And we talked about how Jake Cook and Carter Lowe, even, they're not, it's going to be really, really difficult for anybody to come in and play as a true freshman at a program like Ohio State on the offensive line. It's just a world of difference from high school.
Got to nail in the transfer portal, and you have to be able to develop offensive linemen.
Yep, 2 to 3 years.
You can build the nucleus of your offensive line through the portal. You've still got to go through the high school ranks. There's only so many dudes on earth that are built this way. You got to go get the best young ones. Go look at what Sam Greer looks like. Come on, man. You got to get these guys young. You got to bring them in here. You got to develop them, and you got to keep them. I don't know how it's going to work with the other positions, but offensive line, as the NIL and even the NFL has gotten rolling here, you can see they are scarce and they are so valuable that go look at what the top guys get in the transfer portal this year. The top offensive linemen are going to get as much as anybody besides the quarterbacks. Meek asks again, how are we doing with Damola, the tackle who is committed to Georgia Tech, I believe, Bill, but considering Ohio State?
Yep, still committed to Georgia Tech. Still considering Ohio State. Matter of fact, in my What I Am Hearing on Sunday night, I had an item about Damola. It's hard to say what's going to happen with him. I was told by a good source that they felt that now he made official visits the last few weekends to 2 schools that he hadn't previously obviously made official visits to, South Carolina first and then Ohio State. I was told by a source that their feeling was that Ohio State may have moved ahead by a little bit of South Carolina as far as getting him to flip. But Georgia still wants Damola. They still would like to flip him. Georgia Tech obviously wants to keep him. It's pretty wide open right now of which school he ends up with. I think Georgia Tech might have a little advantage just because he's committed there and he likes it and everything else. He's committed for a reason. But I would absolutely not rule out Georgia. I would absolutely not rule out Ohio State. And we've seen, NIL-wise, what South Carolina can do late in the process.
How about the same question, Bill? Josh Petty, another kid committed to Georgia Tech from the Georgia area. Thoughts? Is there a buzz around him? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't like to say never in recruiting, but right now I would not feel like he's going to flip to Ohio State. Again, I don't like to say never in recruiting, but that's going to be I think Damola is a much more likely guy right now.
All right. Larry Ventresco asks, Bill, you can tell us who this is. Do we offer the DB from Cincinnati because we are losing Alford? I believe he means
Alford.
Naeem Alford. We've already lost Tony Alford. No joke there. Bill, who is it? Quickly, and then Mark, your thoughts on him.
That would be Jordan Woods, Cartersville, Georgia, a defensive back who is long for a corner, 6'3", 175. And he is being recruited as a corner. He is committed to Cincinnati as a cornerback. He was offered a scholarship by Ohio State this weekend as a cornerback. He was offered by Tim Walton, and he was offered by Garen Duhart. I talked to Jordan for a decent amount of time yesterday morning, and he is planning to get back to Ohio State. He was at the Nebraska game, the Ohio State-Nebraska game. So he's been up here once already, even though he's committed to Cincinnati since June. And he is going to get back to Ohio State, he tells me, likely on an official visit. He said that he was probably going to be working on that, scheduling up a visit back to Ohio State with his mom in Ohio State yesterday, today, and get that set up. As far as, does that mean that Naeem Alford is out? No, it doesn't. They have wanted to get 3 cornerbacks if they can in this class, if they feel like there's 3 out there good enough. So they could keep Alford, and they could also take Jordan Woods. So we'll see what happens. Also, Miami just offered Jordan Woods a scholarship as well. I mean, Miami Hurricanes, not Miami of Ohio. So that's a possibility as well for him to get to them too. We'll see. Kentucky also is talking with him as well. I don't think he's going to end up at Kentucky, but I could see him ending up at Ohio State. We'll see.
I read that wrong, Mark. I thought he meant there was a DB from Cincinnati, and I'd missed it. This one's for you. Speaking of the Cincinnati area, what do you think about the running back Hooks and tight end McFarland at Lakota East? Both are juniors. If you could describe each of them quickly and give your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we watched the tight end on the breakdowns after I saw Lakota East. Very tall, 6'5 plus, 220 plus, has the look of that, college tight end, a lot of length. He's going to be one that'll probably get bigger as he gets into college because it doesn't look like he's been physically, finished growing, or it looks like he could, have some weight room time. The running back, I also looked at and said, wow, that's the name that I need to come away with. In general, the Lakota East team I thought was going to make a heck of a run in the playoffs. And then I saw they'd already lost 3 games, but, remember who they're playing, playoff competition all year. I thought maybe they could be a team that they had like one of those teams that had all the elements that I thought needed to make a run in the playoffs. Oh, well, I do like the tight end. I don't know if he'll beat some of the national tight ends, but I'm sure he'll be at the Ohio State camps this year. He was actually the reason I went to see them play because I thought he was going to be a big-time player.
By the way, Dan, can I correct myself real quick? I think correct myself. I think I said when I was talking about Jordan Woods, I think I said that he got offered by Miami. He has not he's not been offered a scholarship by Miami. They want him to come to campus, get him on campus for a visit coming up, and they're definitely interested. They are in contact now, but have not yet offered. Might be something like Ohio State. He came up to Ohio State. They saw him. Then they offered. If Woods visits Miami, wouldn't be surprised at all if they offer him a scholarship.
All right. We've got a ton of questions here. I'm going to finish with this one. Bob Ledford asked, Mark, how is your son doing? And why am I doing this, Mark? Is this an opportunity for not only tell us how healthy your eldest is, but brag on your younger? It sure is. Go ahead.
I thought this was rapid fire.
Seriously. There will be a podcast version of just the answer to this question, but you're going to have to download it with a much bigger hard drive. But, Mark, just take it from here.
Okay. Bob, I thank you for asking. I know you're probably asking about the older son with the torn ACL. I think he bent his knee to 115 degrees the other day. So if you know about those injuries, that's where he's at in that rehab and getting the extension back and getting out of braces. And he's out throwing the football and playing catch on one leg. So, the process is there. I do have another son who we never talk about, 6th grader. And, it's funny that you asked this question. If you follow high school football in Ohio, there's a middle school state championship in Sandusky every year. And there's like 50, 60 teams that enter, and they break them up with the brackets. Canfield was Division II. We're a 5th and 6th grade team, and we played Chillicothe. And I got to give respect to these Chillicothe players and coaches. They won 33 games in a row. Their head coach came right over our team and addressed our whole team and said, just in a classy way, how we taught them how to play football and, how good we were and what we accomplished by beating them. So it was really a nice experience. When it comes to youth sports, those sometimes are few and far between. But my youngest son's a quarterback, and they won the championship. So very fun weekend. That's why I couldn't watch the Buckeye game live, and I got to watch it emotionless and not have to deal with all the ups and downs of fumbles at the goal line and pick sixes. But I appreciate the questions. I don't mind getting personal with my guys. I'm sure there are other dads that have kids, our age and going through these things, or maybe even played against some of your sons up at that event this weekend. So thank you for asking.
Can I mention one thing there? As Mark didn't, his older son is cheating a little bit. He's got the best physical therapist in Youngstown working with him on a very personable level. the best physical therapist in Youngstown happens to be Mark Porter's wife, Stephanie. And I can say that from personal experience. When I got my plantar fasciitis and Achilles tendonitis not too long ago, she has helped me get back up and running and on my feet. So I'm sure she's doing plenty of work with Mark's son.
I don't want to give anything away, but does Bill complain a little more so he gets a little more Porter wife time? I think we all know that's true, because if you've ever seen, Mark has thoroughly outkicked the coverage like we all have. Appreciate these dudes stopping by. We are going to have Sam on football here for a different vibe. On Thursday, Mark will provide a complete breakdown of what you saw against Penn State on the video, but you need to pay for that now. The first part's up. It's premium. Second part coming soon. You'll want to see that. Thank you, gentlemen, for stopping by. All right. Before we bring on, let me get rid of that. Before we bring on our next guest, let's talk about Goodr sunglasses. I've told you guys this a million times. I have lost, I don't even know, thousands of dollars worth of sunglasses at sporting events or events where the day starts out sunny, the drinks flow, and then all of a sudden the night comes in and your glasses are gone and you're out. Goodr has solved that. Stylish sunnies start at only $25 a pair. No slip, no bounce, all polarized. You get a 1-year warranty, 30-day free returns. And I'm telling you, these are good-looking glasses. These aren't the things you buy at Stop and Go for $1.45 on your way to the game. Aerodynamic wraparound shades. You can get shield sunglasses, fully adjustable nose piece, no slip temple grips, and anti-fog coating. If you want to support the show and try a pair, Goodr, Goodr, is giving Bucknuts Morning 5 listeners free shipping. You can go to Goodr.com. That's Goodr.com/Bucknuts and use code Bucknuts for free shipping. Goodr offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and 100% satisfaction. Again, that's Goodr.com/Bucknuts and use code Bucknuts for free shipping. Seriously, that is a legit product. And like we said, Dave and I have said this, these people would not continue to buy ads with us if you guys weren't getting the product. And we are good to go. All right. We've got a real treat here. Look who it, Sam, let's get him. You need to unmute your mic there, my friend. And let's go here with Sam on football. A little bit different. This is all on me. I have watched I'd like to go out and watch content from other sources just to make sure we are on our P's and Q's. Samuel Recker. Great last name. We'll wonder if he's related to Luke Recker. I think he just does a great job. That's the only reason he's here. I'm a fan. So if this doesn't go well, Sam, I'll be the one to blame. But Sam is one of your more analytical types. He is not affiliated with anybody. He's the owner of College Football with Sam YouTube channel. I first saw him before the Oregon game, Sam. Give us a little background on yourself, how you got into the gig here, and where you developed your vast college football knowledge.
Well, I started this channel during the COVID lockdowns because I was bored and I wanted something to do. And I kind of got into football in 2019 when I was attending my high school in, I forget if it's exactly Ypsilanti or Ann Arbor, Michigan, with a friend. And we were talking about the Michigan-Ohio State game and different things. And then I watched the 2019 edition of the game, Michigan versus Ohio State, and some of the playoff games that year and LSU's run. And I thought to myself, this is pretty cool. So I want to get into it. And in 2020, I sort of got into it, but I wasn't committed. In 2021, I really started committing time and resources, learning Photoshop, and I've been doing that ever since because the channel it looks totally different from how it used to look. And now I'm here, and really what I've done is I've just watched games. I've tried to watch other channels to learn different things like schematics, formations. I've read up on I just absorb as much information about the sport as I can with the time that I have. And I am, I got to confess, a Michigan fan, but I've always prided myself on being analytical, being objective. Buckeye fans have actually been the bedrock, the foundation of college football with Sam. Like from the very beginning, many of my now 20,000 subscribers, I guarantee, were Buckeye fans. It wouldn't shock me if maybe half of them were. So that's a little bit of a background information on me, and I hope to one day become the best college football channel on YouTube. That's the goal.
And then I've told this is a running joke here, but the site is called Bucknuts. It's not called Buck Rational Observer. So everyone has to be calm here. I did not, excuse me, I did not even know Sam was a Michigan fan. So that lets you know that his content, I don't feel it was slanted in any way. And even right now, I really wouldn't even care if it was slanted towards Michigan, because as I've said, back to the dark ages. Sorry, but it's the truth. Give me your thoughts. Let's do it this way. I would like your thoughts on the Ohio State game against Penn State in terms of what you thought you were going to see and what you saw. And then tonight, you can go right into this. Tonight, the college football playoff rankings will be announced. And maybe your thoughts on how Ohio State fits into that. And I'm just trying to we're trying to get a more of a national sense on how people are thinking about the Buckeyes. So if you could open up with this past weekend, and then maybe get into the more national perspective. The floor is yours, Sam.
Thank you. I actually picked Penn State to win this game because I thought that Andy Kotelnicki would fix a lot of things at Penn State. Penn State didn't look as dominant as they did last season in terms of scoreboard, but watching them, they were doing some things like actually utilizing some talent they had at wide receiver, getting them open. Tyler Warren was exploding. And they were doing a good job of spoon feeding Aller throws. They were running the football almost 60% of their plays. Like a really run heavy team could run the football well. And I thought that Ohio State, without Simmons and also without Michalski, and the fact that Penn State probably had a better defense, at least better pass defense than Oregon did, would create some matchup issues for Ohio State. And early on, after the long Penn State drive, and then after the pick six, I thought to myself, yeah, this could get ugly really quickly. But then what was so impressive is, I don't know if this was scripted, or I don't know if this was just on the fly. We're going to use a ton of misdirection to throw this defense off. Watching the speed options, watching the misdirection, just all the different plays that Chip Kelly called and that Howard executed, especially Howard, to have the confidence to do that after giving Penn State more than half of their points on the day on that pick six. It was impressive to watch them march down the field, for the offensive line to provide the protection they did for so long against that front, and for the rushing attack to be involved. I mean, they were forcing the issue of gaining outside leverage, of running the football on the outside, and of passing to keep Penn State's defense honest. And that culminated at the end of the day with them being able to run the football, and for them being tougher than Penn State, which is something that I didn't think I would see in this game. I didn't think we'd see that, but we did. They outgained Penn State on the ground, through the air, and that goal line stand was that was impressive. It was also, I think, a bit of ineptitude by Penn State. It looked like Franklin had the play call sheet, but maybe it was Andy Kotelnicki. Regardless, it doesn't matter. They stopped the runs. They were good in coverage. They were locking down Penn State's wide receivers, and very impressive on the part of Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs, they were locking down Tyler Warren for much of the day. Like you had to target Tyler Warren one-on-one and take a risk to get him the football. He was not open. So those are some things that stuck out to me. And I said in my reaction and analysis that this team, while it has faults, like I think that the Buckeyes are good for anywhere from 2 to 5 really inept plays per game, like whether that's turnovers, whether that's bad decisions. Outside of that, I think they're a really good football team. And I think that they're just good enough to be the nation's best team. Are they? Well, we'll figure that out as the season goes. We still have games to play. And it looks like now with their win over Penn State, as long as they beat Indiana, they're going to match up with Oregon again in the Big Ten championship game, which I'm very excited for. As for the college football playoff rankings tonight, I personally think that Ohio State should be number 2. They've looked more impressive than Georgia. I don't know if you would classify the win over Penn State as more impressive than the win over Texas, but Texas and Penn State, really outside of their games against Georgia and Ohio State, haven't played much of anybody. So I'm curious to see how the committee values, I guess, like on the field performance, the eye test, and dominance, which I think would go to Ohio State. Or do you value conference branding? Do you value the perceived strength of the SEC over the Big Ten, which I think in large part this season, along with last season, was perception, at least at the top, not actual fact. Those are some things that I'm curious to see there.
Question for you. You mentioned them. What's your thoughts on Indiana?
My thoughts on Indiana are, after this past weekend, watching what they did to Michigan State, which was very similar to Ohio State. It was very similar to what Oregon did. A little bit different. Michigan State had a stronger start, but Indiana had a much stronger finish than in those two games. I think that Indiana is better than Penn State after seeing what I watched. I think Indiana, their biggest strength, which in large part makes up for their lack of talent. You guys working with 24/7 Sports, I heard you talking about recruiting. Indiana has a blue chip ratio that doesn't even exceed a fifth of their roster, but they're very fundamentally sound. Like, they don't miss tackles. They don't. And if you make a mistake, D'Angelo Pons or Sean Asbury will make you pay through the air. And Rourke, I don't think he's first in QBR anymore, but I think he's second. And their offensive line is recruited. It is developed via high school. Bob Bobstad does a very good job. I'm excited to see that game against Ohio State. That is going to be a game where my eyes are glued to the TV screen. I'm watching every play, because that's going to be a fascinating matchup right there. Because Indiana is one of the best teams in the country. I think that they are, I'm going to say top 5. I don't know about number 1 yet. Efficiency-wise, I think they are, but how efficient you are with your talent is different, because Ohio State and a lot of these teams at the top have way more blue chip talent than Indiana does. And that typically matters, especially at the end of the season.
I didn't expect to ask this question, but you would know better. Indiana has a foe this weekend. I believe Indiana is a 14-point favorite, or at least against Michigan. Is that correct? And if so, you would know better than me. I can't remember. Has Indiana ever been in the history of the program that large of a favorite over Michigan? And if, what's your thought on that game?
No. Even in 2020, Michigan, I remember, was a favorite over Indiana, and I didn't know nearly as much about football as I did then. But watching that Michigan State game in 2020, I thought to myself, what are they doing? Like, why is that Michigan team favored over that Indiana team with Penix and all that they have? But that's sometimes the fault of power ratings, is sometimes they're too slow to adjust to the curve. I understand why that is, but that's probably a topic for another day. Indiana, they should be that large of a favorite, because I think you look at Michigan and how they're inconsistent and undisciplined and anything but fundamentally sound on both sides of the football. If Michigan had Dan Lanning and his assistant pool, or Ryan Day and his assistant pool, they would probably be, in my mind, 8-1, 7-2 right now. And I'm assuming they would bring in a transfer portal quarterback, because they're competent enough to do that. And I think Indiana's staff's one of the best in the country. Michigan's is one of the worst in the Big Ten, if not one of the worst in the country. And I'll make a preview and prediction video either today or early tomorrow talking about that game. I think Indiana's going to win big. I think that Indiana will exploit a secondary that probably won't feature Will Johnson. And even if they do, they don't have more than Will Johnson to be consistently competent in coverage, outside of maybe Jair Hill. And he's also hurt. And Michigan's rushing attack on defense as a result suffers, because what Oregon did, what Texas did, is what Ohio State really did to Penn State. You exploit outside leverage, you make them play honest, you spread out the defense, and then you attack wherever you can. And Indiana will do that, and they'll do it rather well. And Michigan's offense, I don't think, is going to do much. I mean, look at what Indiana did to Michigan State. They held them to 18 yards rushing without sacks. And then when you adjusted for sacks, it was negative 30. It's just, Indiana's better in the trenches. They're better on the outside. They're better at almost every position outside of probably tight end and defensive tackle and defensive end and cornerback number 1 if Will Johnson is healthy. And it's in Bloomington, and they have the coaching advantage. That's a nightmare matchup. Indiana will do to Michigan what Oregon and Texas did. I don't think there's a question about that.
It's interesting. Like I said, I wasn't totally versed on your fandom because you come across clean, which is a credit to those who like to follow football. And I would say your comments on Indiana are similar to guys like yourself who are a little bit more analytics and numbers based, are bigger on Indiana than the traditional people who are looking at the eye test and maybe, like myself, swayed a little bit by a jersey they expect to be on a hooper rather than a football player. But let's talk one thing the Bucknutters do enjoy, and that is the demise up north thus far. And given you're a fan, I'm curious, did you expect it to be this precipitous, the drop-off? Like I did say dark ages, like I felt they would go back to it. And I was saying that a little bit tongue in cheek. Before the season, I actually thought they'd be pretty good. I felt like their talent on defense and just their overall physical strength would allow them to stay in games. And to be fair, they won games by a decent margin last year. If you win games by 14 points and you get 13 points worse, you still win by a point. So I thought they'd still be much more competitive. Frankly, they've been awful. They've been borderline inept and poorly coached. They make a lot of mistakes that you just hadn't seen in a while. Your thoughts on the Michigan program? Is this a blip on the radar? Have they returned to the dark ages? I mean, where would they rank in the Big Ten right now if you're doing the rankings? I mean, you could make an argument for Minnesota. So where do you see Michigan as a program this year and going forward?
Well, I thought Michigan entering this season would be what Iowa has right now on offense: elite rushing attack, very questionable passing attack, and then enough of a quarterback run to really make that rushing attack a non-negotiable so that no one could stop it, even if they stacked the box. And then I thought they would have a slightly worse version of their defense last year.
Right.
That
still damn good though.
Yeah, exactly. Still one of the nation's best. I thought that Ohio State and Iowa would be better than Michigan on defense, and then Michigan would be third. That hasn't been the case at all. Their defense isn't even top 25. Their offense is not top 75. And my initial prediction of they would go into the game 11-0, losing to Ohio State, looks pretty bad, because now Michigan's on track to going 6-6, maybe 5-7 if David Braun decides to pull something out in what would be, I think, a trap spot for Michigan. I don't know if this is a blip on the radar or not, because the coaching is so bad, whether it's assistants, whether it's coordinators. I mean, whether it's Wink Martindale lining up Mason Graham at defensive end, which just makes me want to turn off the TV, whether it's Kurt Campbell running a reverse end around to pass to Alex Orji on 4th and 5, whether it's Alex Orji not following his blocks perfectly, which I don't necessarily blame on him, because the blocking hasn't been, it's been good, but it's not been great or elite, which you need it to be if your passing attack's going to be that bad. It's almost comical to watch. I don't even get, like against Oregon, I didn't get very emotional after the Michigan loss. I just accepted it. Against Michigan State, I was shocked pleasantly that Michigan actually won. I thought that Michigan State was going to go in there and not dominate, but game control Michigan into submission. To answer your question, if this is a blip on the radar, I only think that will be the case if massive staff changes are made after this year, whether that's everyone getting canned or whether that's Sharon Moore canning most of the assistants, both of the coordinators, and using the money that Michigan has, maybe not just for recruiting, but also for hiring some very competent staffers, play callers, developers, trainers of the game. because recruiting is important, but something that I've said on my channel time and time again, where I think I go against a lot of national talking heads, and I don't know if this is correct or not, it's just a theory, is that recruiting is very important. But I think that Miami, Florida, Florida State some years, Texas some years, Nebraska under Scott Frost, and Michigan, like under Rich Rod or Brady Hoke, have shown us that coaching matters a whole lot. And that I think that sometimes recruiting gets a tad bit overvalued just because we forget the development that these young men go through and the training that they go through in the preseason entering these games. And I just think Michigan's done a horrific job on most, if not all fronts. I mean, they're going to have 5 first-round picks, likely, according to mock drafts, and yet they're 6-6. To me, even with the situation at quarterback and wide receiver, it's inexcusable. And I don't buy the fact that bringing in a top 10 or top 5 recruiting class will matter all that much without coaching changes. Like I love that Michigan is getting involved in NIL, just like when Ohio State got involved in NIL. I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty cool, because now they're going to be competing with the SEC, if not maybe surpassing them because of who they are as a program. That's really my thoughts on Michigan right there. I don't know if this is a blip on the radar or not. And yes, it feels like how I feel when watching Rich Rod or Brady Hoke games sometimes in my spare time. It feels that bad.
Yeah, it's definitely dropped off. I knew it would drop off, and I said they were going to the dark ages. I have to admit, it's dropped off way more than I expected. Shocker, Sam, that did not bum anyone out that last 2 minutes as your voice buckled a tad with fandom. The Bucknutters slurped it up with love. Let everybody, we will have Sam on again later on in the season, maybe closer to the end, and let him put everything in perspective. Sam, let everybody know how they can follow you. I know you are YouTube channel based, but any social media or any other way people can get Sam on football.
Well, for YouTube, just type college football with Sam in the search bar. It'll be the first thing that comes up, whether it's spaces or not. You can just type that. And then my Twitter handle is twitter.com or x.com/CFBWSam, at CFB with W for with Sam. That's how you can find me on Twitter. I haven't been engaged in many other areas, like even Spotify. I've cut back because it's not profitable, and I'm using the earnings on my channel to fund my college tuition, where
there you go.
Yes, I'm attending the University of Michigan, and I'm paying that using this. So I have to be smart and cut some things back, and I can't be everywhere at once, but you can find me on Twitter. I'm very engaging with the comment section on YouTube. So if any of you watching this like to comment and are disappointed when people don't give you a reply in the comments, I try my best to do that. Not always perfect, but I like to engage with the audience. It's what's beautiful about the sport is I read comments from people, and there are some pretty knowledgeable people who follow me. And because I read their comments, I think I get more knowledgeable. It sometimes forces me to research things or to correct points that I made or admit that I was wrong. And that's what's helped me as a channel to really grow and get better, is not accepting user feedback from everyone, but the people who are dedicated and know what they're talking about, or they bring up a big and good point. It's always good.
Well, the beauty of college football now and the medium and the internet is you get access to guys like Sam who you may not have been able to when I was a youngster in the newspaper age. So, Sam, we appreciate it. We'll have you back on, and can't say we're bummed out about your squad. Have a good one, buddy. I want to mention this before we go, that I was remiss in not congratulating Coach Diebler and the boys for getting the win against number 19 Texas last night. Bruce Thornton with 20, Micah Parrish with 17, my guy Devin Royal off the bench with 16. So went out to Vegas, got a great W by 8 points over a ranked team. Great start to the season. So I apologize for not getting to that earlier. Longest show ever. Have a good one, Bucknutters.